But one of the things we've been talking about within the Department of Athletics is that we really want to make sure that we come out of this better than we entered it. And again, a tribute to you all on investing in yourselves, because that's the surest way of making sure that you're making progress even during this time of great challenge. I'm going to open it up to our panelists and ask that they introduce themselves. They're going to give about a 2-minute intro on their background of how they got from GW to where they are today. So I'm gonna ask Debbie Briggs to get us started.
Can you hear me? Hi, everyone. Really thankful to be here. So quick on my background. I graduated from GW a long time ago, 1990. I was on the swim team for all 4 years there and was a business major. I spent about a decade in consulting. I was with Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture, and then Booz Allen and Hamilton. Was with a startup company for about a consumer product startup for about 8 years, and then got into leadership consulting and recruiting and executive search for big companies and big roles. And then most recently with startup companies. So I live now outside of Boston, and there's a big tech scene here, and I work with startup companies as they're just getting funded and spinning up and sort of helping them get their all their people processes and systems in place to scale for growth.
Awesome, Debbie. Thank you so much. I think Debbie might have the coolest title since she's head of people. That's awesome, and we'll definitely talk a lot about that. Tony, why don't you go next? Oh, Tony, I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, can everyone hear me clearly? Okay, perfect. Yes, again, once again, my name is Tony Brown. I'm an O2 graduate of GW. I'm really honored to be here today. I know that my background's a little different in the fact that I was a baseball player at GW. I actually spent some time playing professionally for about 3.5 years. Really exercise science graduate of GW, and really thought I wanted to become a physical therapist. Took the opportunity while I was out of baseball to get my own physical therapy treatment, and decided I didn't want to be a physical therapist. So had the opportunity to be introduced to IT recruiting with a big national firm called Tech Systems. From there, actually met the 2008-2009 downturn, and obviously had to readjust and retool, and found another opportunity, and that's how I found myself going to a direct recruitment opportunity, and then now here into executive search, similar to Debbie. Our firm is a boutique firm, not a big firm, but we do work with a lot of companies nationally. Obviously, being based here in the DC area, we do work quite heavily with the federal government, as well as a lot of the large contractors like Raytheon and Boeing, Northrop Grumman, those folks. But with the federal government, we do quite a bit at the senior executive service level and presidential appointee level. So just to kind of give you a little background about myself. But thank you so much, Tanya.
Tony, that's awesome. I also think you bring a unique experience, having gone through that economic downturn in 08 and 09. And I want to highlight for our audience when you talked about readjusting and retooling. I think that's something that's really important for us as we deal with the current climate. Brian, another swimmer. You're up.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you again. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I feel very honored and very just happy to do this. So I was a swimmer at GW. I graduated in 2005 with a journalism degree. And right after I graduated, I decided to get into coaching. So I actually was a swim coach for 3 different universities, with my last 4 years being at Georgetown. I know, I'm sorry about that. But from there, I kind of decided to, just reevaluate my career goals, where I saw myself in terms of what I wanted to do next professionally. And I decided I wanted to make a pivot into recruiting. So I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about our backgrounds later, but I decided to make a pivot into recruiting. And I was hired at a staffing firm called Hire Strategy. It's a local firm in the DC area where I was recruiting accounting and finance professionals, all the way up from entry level to CFO to level. And then for the past 4 years, I've been with EY as a campus recruiter. So kind of combining my previous higher ed experience with my recent recruiting experience. And that's how I ended up at EY.
Awesome, Brian. I mean, I think you guys can hear this. Their paths might not have been exactly what they went to school for, and I think that's something that they'll continue to share. It's not necessarily what was your major, but the tools that you gain along the way, and really understanding your strengths. As Julia Brown would have us focus on your strengths as you navigate your way into your career. Debbie, I'm going to have you get us started. You know, you've had so many roles where you've been working to recruit and hire talent. What characteristics or qualities are you looking for when you're hiring quality talent for your firms?
I get asked that question a lot. And it's you know, the key question, right? And I think there's really two types of roles that I think the answer is for two different types. A lot of roles are very specific to the function and to a very specific skill set or what the company needs to do. For those kinds of positions, whether it's product, engineering, marketing, finance, I like to see examples of really hands-on roles, measurable results, command of the functional domain, and ownership of initiatives. Even if something maybe didn't go as well as you know, it was either a failure or an initiative that ended up not taking off. I like to see that someone had ownership of it and they really got their hands dirty and they know they know the systems, they know the lingo, they know the leaders, they know best practices. They've used, you know, a lot of different sort of tools within that specific functional area. Then there's another kind of role that's really your, you know, your best athlete role. You want, and with all of these roles, you want all of these other kind of, you know, just general skills, but things like intellect, obviously everyone always says asking good questions, but it really is the question sort of in a dialogue and in a conversation and a discussion versus questions that are packaged and canned that someone comes to the interview with. I like to see someone pivot and ask something that obviously they didn't know they were going to ask, and that shows to me a connection with the conversation and an ability to dialogue. I like to see people who had to work for something. It's very clear that their background, things were handed to them. They, you know, received roles through connections and parents, friends, and everything else. It's good to work that network, but I like to see that there was some hustle in someone's background and they had to, you know, work for something. So that would be my answer.
I love that. There's so many little nuggets in there. One that I appreciate, you know, we all prepare for interviews and we have those kind of canned or practice responses, but being able to critically think during that interview and, like you said, kind of pivot and maybe ask a question that you didn't think of before you got there, but you're gathering information on that interview and being able to adjust, I think is critical. Tony, I'm going to ask you to talk about that retooling that took place. You know, you graduated with a degree in exercise science. You were heading down a path thinking physical therapy was the way to go. You kind of got some personal feedback, right? Because you went through physical therapy yourself. And then you adjusted. And you also were facing an economic crisis where there are probably fewer jobs. Can you just talk about that, where you were heading in one direction and then you're like, yep, I've got feedback that tells me I'm not going in that direction any longer, and you pivoted?
No, thank you, Tanya. And you know, the biggest thing for me, and like I said, during that time, and like I said, I was on a professional baseball career, got injured, and that's how I ended up in physical therapy. And so to me, just, you know, taking that time to even stop and say, okay, am I going to get myself better to go back and play professionally, or am I going to take the opportunity now and go out and be an actual professional, workforce professional? And so to me, that was a transition, and really mentally, that I had to kind of make. But then once I actually got started in recruiting, IT recruiting, got into a great organization that had great training. And I know that's one thing for all the folks that are sitting out there in the audience right now, is that the training that I got in my first job, I can say that the other jobs I've had since then have been the most, that's been the most influential for me. So to me, what it's understand, I like to be an active listener, and what Debbie's talking about in an interview, how to be able to pivot because you're actively listening, not necessarily, you know, have that scripted question and answer. So I just don't want to go too far down that line, but just wanted to share that active listening piece. But to me, the pause during the 2008, 2009 period, you saw all the jobs coming off the board. No one was hiring. And it was kind of like, okay, how can they keep 70 of us in this office? There's nothing to work on. You can kind of see it, but you want to, I think the GW factor is like, hey, stick to it, show up, be there, do as much as you can extra to show that you're going to be there. But the second piece was when that letter came to me saying, hey, we're going to give you severance, we just can't keep you, was like, okay, what do you do now? And I always thought to myself, wish somebody wrote a book, what would you do now? And really, I took the time to sit back and say, okay, I've already been in this industry, I've learned these skills. I think I want to utilize these skills, but now where do I want to either specify or go? And so to me, it was really kind of feast or famine, looking for opportunities. And I was actually in the Philadelphia area at the time, but came back to the DC market. DC market just never really got hit by that downturn. So had a great opportunity. And so I guess the avenue there is to say, hey, don't pigeonhole yourself to being back at home or where it may be. It may take you to travel somewhere to go find the great opportunity. And so had I not went back to GW, came back to DC, I wouldn't be where I am today. So keep the options open, but also take the time and say, hey, maybe you have a finance degree or journalism degree like Brian. There are other opportunities out there that have the quote unquote best athlete skill set that it's going to take the time for you to learn, but someone's going to be willing to give you that opportunity if you can come up, show up, the composure, the professionalism that you're capable of learning. I think that was the biggest thing going forward for me. So making that transition, that was, having those hardcore skills, but then having a little bit of expertise from the training I received, and then kind of being able to springboard that forward.
Tony, I appreciate that. I also, I love that you made a move, right? And I think being open to making moves is something that is, we don't talk a ton about. In college athletics, we talk about it all the time. And Brian experienced this as a coach. Like, you got to move, right? There's only certain places where there are universities. But sometimes we think, nah, I'm comfortable here in this space, but there might be another opportunity in another city. So I appreciate you sharing that. Brian, you have had a unique path where you graduated as a collegiate swimmer, and you go off and you work in college athletics. And at some point you pivot into the private sector and recruiting. Can you talk about that decision where you're like, all right, I'm done with this phase and I'm going to pivot, and what that was like?
Sure. So good question. If anyone would have told me in 2005, after I graduated, that I'd be a campus recruiter at EY, I would have said, what the heck is EY? So I guess the point is that your career is truly a journey. Things will change, your interests will change, your circumstances will change. So kind of being open to that is really critical just for your career. For me personally, I was at 3 different schools for 7 years total. And I kind of came to the conclusion, if I wanted to take the next step, I was going to have to move somewhere maybe I didn't want to go, or which I just wasn't really willing to at that certain time. And just the opportunities were just not as many, and I didn't want to stick in the same role. So it wasn't easy to kind of come to that decision, but I really took solace in is that what I really enjoyed about my role as a coach was the recruiting. That was kind of literally 90% of my job, right? Is recruiting. You're always recruiting. So I enjoyed that aspect of kind of building a program, marketing our opportunities to student athletes, and convincing them that X was the place to be. So I kind of took that skill set, and I wanted to kind of use that into the corporate environment. So I decided to get some experience at a staffing firm called Hire Strategy into accounting and finance. And I did fairly well there. I enjoyed it, but I knew I kind of wanted to stick with that higher ed background that I had before, just going to colleges and interacting with that student population. So I was able to kind of connect with someone from EY. Networking is really critical to any job search that you have. And I was able to find that individual through a person I coached with, funny enough. So she connected me with the right people. I interviewed, fortunately got the job, and I've been here ever since.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And I think for our participants, I loved what you said with regard to your career path being a journey. And it really is. I don't think very many people graduate with a script that's going to take them through their 40-year, 45-year career. And more often than not nowadays, unlike previous generations, we are going to move and adapt. Which brings me to this next question, which is for anybody on the panel. Since you're all former student athletes, and I'd argue you're all still athletes, what's the most valuable skill, experience, or knowledge that you gained from being a student athlete? And how did that translate into your professional life?
I'll jump in. I think one thing that, whether it was being a student athlete at GW or just really, a lifelong athlete, even leading up to that, is a level of confidence and ability to bet on yourself. Tony talked about sort of resilience and pivoting in a career, and I think life, your personal life can throw you a lot of curveballs. Professional life throws you curveballs. There's and having the just that confidence to know that we've been through injuries before, we've been through disappointments, we've been through exhaustion, we've been through things that are really, really tough, and we still get up every day and go and compete, and are able to study and work and still continue to compete at a decently high level, and that brings just an enormous amount of confidence and self-reliance that I sort of took for granted, until you start to realize professionally how many people around you don't have that. They really haven't had to pick themselves up different times. They haven't had to reinvent, and there's something about athletics that really toughens you up, especially I think competing and being dedicated to a sport enough that that to compete at the D1 level. It just provides just know that you're usually the most confident person in the room, even if it feels like you're nervous, or you don't know what you feel like. Oh, everyone else knows what they're doing, but you're really in the you're in the top 90% from a confidence perspective. I think just because you've dealt with a lot of heartbreak and things that didn't go your way.
Yeah, Debbie, I piggyback that, and in fact, to me, what I always think of myself is composure. Like, to me, no matter what I'm going through, no matter what I've got done, like I said, it could be a deadline, it could be something at home, it could be something at work. Is composure. Is like, how am I going to get this done? And so, to me, you talk about being exhausted, coming from a game or practice, and you've got to get paper done. It's finals, it's midterms, whatever it may be. It's like, you've got to settle yourself down, get composed, and figure out how you're going to get it done. And so, to me, that is one of the biggest pieces, I guess, when I wrap that, what Debbie spoke of, is composure. But the one piece, I think it took me a little bit of time at GW to learn, and then even as an exit at GW, was learning. Academic education is learning. And so, to me, you come out of high school, you might have been a prep star, and you come in and say, hey, I know this, I know that. But the ability at GW is to teach you how to learn, because whether it be through successes or through failures, you should be learning. And that's the one key thing that you can't stop doing, is learning. And even though I've been in my job, going on 9 years now, learning is still a big part of it. Even though, I know there's typical questions that I ask, there's typical things that you look for, still learning consistently. So to me, that is one of the things that, listening, learning, and composure. Those are the things I can share with the audience today, is that GW, or just the athletic experiences, teach you to learn, listen, and be composed, because you've got to be able to execute at the end of the day. And those things lead to execution, I believe.
I just want to jump in really quickly and say time management. So part of my role is to obviously, source candidates and find the best candidates for practices. And when I talk to decision makers about who they're hiring and why they're hiring them, when they see athletics on the resume, they think time management. This person, I can give them projects, multiple projects. I know they know how to manage their time better than people coming from school who don't have that background or that experience. So that is something that's very well looked upon, and it's like a skill that really, I think, carries over into any type of role that you do pursue.
I love that. I would love, as we're talking to individuals that are a part of this great pause. Now, the truth of the matter is so many of them have been as busy as they normally are because they're still training. Many of them are in summer school. But this is a time where they can invest in themselves. So for any of the panel members, what skills would you recommend our student athletes developing during this off period, such as a break due to COVID, or even an academic break, a spring break or a winter break, or a semester break?
Um, I think you can use this time in two different ways. So, one is just networking or trying to set up informational interviews. I don't know if you guys talk about that a lot with your student athletes, but having informational interviews, especially with alumni, with people who you can just kind of ask questions to about what they do, if it's a certain career path you're interested in, that is critical. And that for me, that was critical for me to kind of get to where I am right now from making that transition from coaching. I spoke with different people who were involved in campus recruiting or doing other types of recruiting, just to understand their functions of the job, what qualities, what characteristics that these companies are looking for, what are the positives and what are the negatives, right? About each role, so I could get a better understanding of what I would be a better fit for. And some of the best advice that I heard too is that throughout these information interviews, if you ask for advice, you get a job, but if you ask for a job, you get advice, right? So kind of approaching it that way. People, and the way I got through EY is having an informational interview with my campus recruiter, just asking what she did. And she enjoyed the conversation we had and was able to refer me to the right people. So I think that's one thing that anyone can do at this point is to have those informational interviews. And then I don't know if anyone's heard of the website called Udemy, but there are plenty of classes you can take on Excel or PowerPoint or data visualization at your own pace, which I think is just something that you can do, to kind of fill your time, throughout this pause.
Yeah, I would say that you're right, Brian. Those skills like PowerPoint or Excel, depending on the type of opportunity you come into, just having a little more confidence in using that software or systems. I mean, that's just something that, again, that learning piece I talked about. If you can get an extra leg up on that and come in the door and be able to help, you might be an internship, but you might be able to help that person above you with a PowerPoint deck, and that's something they're going to say, wow, this person was able to put together some nice slides for me, and that again may parlay into an opportunity. But yeah, those type of skills. And then, I think most folks now at this age or this stage in the game, everyone knows how to do a little bit of web research. Yeah, I think that, I think all three of us definitely do a ton of, whether it be going through LinkedIn or actually learning how to use LinkedIn. And so, how do you request an informational interview? How is to kind of reach out to someone blind or cold and say, hey, I saw your title. I even tell some of the executives I work with who are looking to change careers is go find 5 organizations that you would like to be in. Go look at the title and look for those folks. See what's in their profile. Then ask for that informational interview. And don't ask questions like, hey, are you guys hiring? You want to understand, hey, exactly like Brian said, what is it that you do? What's going on at your organization? What are some of the things that you guys are working on? And so that kind of starts a conversation. And again, you never know where that conversation leads. But I think it's that effort to understand how to use LinkedIn to your benefit, and reaching out to folks, joining professional groups within LinkedIn. I think that's another area where you start to see jobs posted, topics being discussed, and then obviously, if it's something applicable to your degree, you can kind of get into further, discussions of interest.
Yeah, and I'd add to all of that. I mean, beyond the sort of the traditional professional networking, because this is a tough time obviously for everyone, including the people who you want to have informational interviews with right now. They are, they're stretched, and so it's difficult to carve out that time. And I think, to try and use you could be frustrated that you feel like you're not doing enough networking right now. And it has nothing to do with your lack of effort or ability to do it. It's just the people who to be networked with are really, right now they're stretched with family and worries and professional, stresses. So I think, I'll have 3 kids in college this coming year. And I think, this is a pause. Be patient. This is not, with the perspective that comes from being out in the world for a long time. It's try not to feel like you're on a treadmill and it's just, you're not making any forward progress. Use this time to definitely learn Excel, learn PowerPoint. Data visualization, analytics packages and software, and learning how to present information, in dashboards. Learn the top 10, how to read a, top 10 business statements, financial statements, if you weren't a business major. Basic computer programming skills. Not that you're going to go and ever be a programmer, but understanding how it works is so necessary for so many different roles. And you're not get this time back. This is also a gift where you can't be judged by not doing something right now. So use the time. Learn how to golf, learn how to play tennis, learn how to, play blackjack, things that you'll look back and they help you bond with people and they will help you professionally along the way. And, try your best to just give yourself a little bit of a break.
I think we just got the soundbite for this this panel. Learn how to play blackjack.
True.
Have
a couple decent tricks.
I know it's funny. When you said it, I was like, I went right to a moment where I had a networking opportunity with an athletics director at a blackjack table, and I was like, she's telling the truth. Golf, tennis, different things that you're going to end up doing to network and build those relationships. And when you think about it, if you don't have that skill set, if you can't golf, then you miss out on that time on the golf course. And I'm not saying it's an absolute, but it's a place where business and relationships are formed. So I appreciate
you don't have to be great at any of these things. Just have passable, just know the basics.
Yep. I appreciate that. I was thinking about one of the questions that was asked, and I think you guys are probably the perfect panel to answer this, has to do with resumes. And we hear this all the time. Student athletes feel like they don't have a ton on their resume because they've been spending their career focused on going to school and being the best athlete they can be. What are some things that you've seen on resumes that really help somebody stand out, even if they don't have a laundry list of internships and experiences?
One thing I would recommend is, if you don't have that traditional internship experience, what have you, is class projects. I see that a lot on resumes. So if there's projects where you've had to work on teams and develop a certain product or deliverable for a business type presentation, like that can count as experience because you're working with other people, you're working with internal, external stakeholders, you're presenting, information to an audience. That is important. I'm just speaking from my world. That is really, really important. So if you're able to kind of showcase that type of, present that in your resume, present that within your experience, that is looked very highly upon. And don't shy away about putting your athletic experience. That shows dedication, commitment, time management, but I would say like any type of class projects that are related to kind of what you're looking for, I think is something that you can put in your resume that is, very looked highly upon.
Yeah. Good.
I would add to that too, that, don't be, if you didn't have a full summer, 40 hours a week internship, you don't put that on your resume. Of like, people don't need to know whether maybe it was a 2-week thing or it was a 1 day, every other week during a summer. So if you're just saying you were a something assistant or this was your internship wherever, as long as the bullet points of what you did are really meaty and they tell a story and they're they're action oriented and there's some results of something that you contributed to that is obvious by the end of the time. No one asks, did you get paid? How much did you get paid? How long did you work there? It just says, summer 2020. For all anyone knows, it was 4 or 5 days during the summer of 2020. And the resume really gets you, I mean, it's a different thing at different points in your career, what the access point is and how important it is, but it gets you with that interview. And then the interview, it rarely is referred to, maybe for one question, but then a really good interview, you're talking about stuff and you actually go off the resume. So the resume gets you in the door and is, you know, don't feel like, oh, I haven't done anything. Yeah, you have. To Brian's point, put a school project on there, volunteer, you know, with one of your parents, volunteer with a neighbor, you know, when you're home for break, or right now, you know, do something that is, you can really explode more as you describe it in your resume. No one's the truth police aren't going to come and say, well, was that, you know, 40 hours a week and a full-time gig? That's not, you know, you're not misrepresenting yourself.
Yeah, and Debbie, I think to me, I think like you said, the resume means different things at different stages of your career. And I think to me at this point, for the audience that's out there that are, whether you're in an internship now or you're looking for an internship now, to me, the biggest thing is being able to talk about your experiences. So to me, that class project, hey, did you ever have to help somebody out? You need to pull them along, be able to describe what you did, just take them through the steps of what it was like to say, hey, we're on a 5-person project. There were 2 folks that were just lacking. So here's the steps I took to kind of get everyone together. That leadership comes out, to be able to show empathy, to show the opportunity to bring folks along. So being able to speak about that clearly, I think is one thing that the resume is there, that's your handshake, but then you've got to be able to speak clearly about what it is you did and how, how'd you overcome something? So maybe, hey, you got the job through your mom's friend or whatever it may have been, but did you ever have to, you know, what was the challenge of that job? Be able to speak about the challenges of what it was like to execute that role. So those are the things I take from, especially from the entry level piece, because there was a program that I used to run, it's been unfortunately put on hold right now, but I was dealing with a lot of folks coming out of college, like probably in the chairs that you guys are sitting in out there now, but they didn't have much on the resume, but what I wanted to know was, you know, what class did you enjoy while you're in school? Tell me about that. Why did you enjoy it? You know, be able to describe that. B, you know, again, talking about difficulty of a class. Did you go to a professor? Did you speak to them? Did you just kind of sit back and just take it? You know, talk to me a little bit. Be able to speak about your experiences clearly, with passion and obviously with details, demonstrated experience. I think that's one thing that, you know, not having everything meaty and metric or measurements on your resume, you've got to still be able to speak about, you know, how you've done something, how you've helped other folks. And I think that's a lot of things that a lot of employers now are looking at the entry level. How do you help folks? Because again, it's not necessarily you're going to come in and get a task rabbit. You need someone that's going to be able to manipulate and be a leader of other folks. So to me, I think you get that through your athletic career, but you've got to be able to speak clearly about it.
Awesome, awesome stuff. You know, I think about that storytelling and how important that is during an interview, and thinking through just your experiences within your team and how you overcome failure, how you deal with conflict management, or how you speak to your coaches and understand that crucial conversation that you had to have with your coach when something was going on, and being able to tell that story in an interview. You know, it just shows that you've had great experiences as a student athlete. I love that. You know, Debbie, this question's directed at you. We talk a lot about our strengths at GW. We are a Gallup Strengths Finder school, so our students go through a strengths assessment. They understand what their top 5 strengths are, and we work on it. Was there a point of time in your career where you were able to identify your own talents and strengths, and then how did you use those strengths to advantage yourself in your own career?
Well, you know, maybe that'll happen in the future. I'll figure it out. Because it's all a journey, right? We don't know what we're doing tomorrow. I think, you know, in terms of back to Tony's point, or I think it was maybe Brian's point about time management. Again, understanding, sort of taking that type of skill for granted. Maybe early on in my career, and then realizing later that it is, you know, being organized and being a great time manager is an incredible strength and skill set. And maybe I had it naturally, but it also was definitely a requirement as a student athlete. And, you know, again, I just took it for granted. And so now that I know, wait a minute, I'm going to always be a little bit more organized and able to do things more efficiently than others, and I look for the way to be efficient about them, and that's a strength. You know, I can go into a situation and try to and make a, you know, a big, I sort of inherit messy situations. It's a big pile of spaghetti and I've got to straighten everything out, and do it as quickly and, you know, with constraints, time constraints, financial constraints, and I like that. And I think as I, you know, later on in my career, understanding for myself that I have a level of empathy and ability to sort of understand that everyone out there is fighting a hard battle. And that I think that came also from, you know, I didn't realize it at the time, but from athletics and being a team captain and knowing things that people were struggling with, and you know, needing to be a good supporter and a good teammate, and that having that type of strength and ability to have conversations, confidential conversations, and hold things in the vault, which is a skill set. And, you know, for me, became something that I am able to leverage at work, and making that something that, you know, being hopefully a trusted place to go, as, you know, with people and for talent and HR issues that can be really, really sensitive. You know, it's not everyone wants to handle that messy part of people. And I, you know, I think that was something that sort of struck me later on, and I've leaned on.
I love that. You know, and it's interesting too, where you said like, maybe I'll recognize this in the future. And I do think Gallup and other assessments help us. They help us by saying, you know, these are the things that you test for. And so now we can dive into those strengths. Or we do a DISC assessment, same thing. We learn what our profile is. It helps us understand ourselves better. And that falls into emotional intelligence and self-awareness, things that are really high on employers' list of things that we look for when we're hiring great talent. I'm gonna kind of throw the same question at Brian and Tony. You know, at what point did you recognize this is a strength that I have, and then how does it actualize itself in your jobs?
Brian, you want to go ahead?
You can go first.
Okay, sure. You know, I think, you know, it's weird. And I'm glad you guys are, you know, doing this Gallup assessment. And it's weird that, you know, when you first take your first assessment and you get the results back, and you're like, oh, that's not me. I thought I was someone different, you know. But at the same time, it's like, again, that ability to learn. So to me, when I think about the strengths, and I really coming from GW, from the physical therapy background, I was in the training room. I'm an athlete, and I'm with other athletes. I'm listening to other folks of being down, and hey, I just had an ACL injury. I'm trying to, you know, work with them to kind of get back. It's that level of listening and influence that I've got to say, hey, you know what, this is a starting point. You've got to get going. And so to me, I found that my biggest strength was listening, but then also starting to encourage and influence. And so to me, on the recruiting side, you know, hey, I always tell everyone, I have a job that I'm working on. I have requirements that I have in front of me. I don't know if it's the right opportunity, but I've got to listen to you to make sure it's the right path that we're going to put you in front of a client for. Because again, you may have the CFO skills, you may have, you know, the CEO skills, but again, is it the right opportunity for you? So I've got to do my best job of listening and understanding, career-wise, family-wise, you know, compensation-wise, is that all going to fit? And so to me, I would take that as a reverse for folks in the audience. Listen in an interview, like, is this going to be the right role for me? I know you want to get that opportunity to get your foot in the door, and really, you do want to get your foot in the door somewhere and just get started. So someone can say you showed up, someone, you know, they put in the effort, but make sure you're listening and making sure this is the right. Hey, we start at 8 o'clock here, or we start at 8:30. We're here to 7 o'clock. Hey, you know what? That time where you want to go to happy out with your friends, not so much. You know, obviously these days it's not necessarily an opportunity anymore, but make sure that you're listening and make sure that this is the right opportunity you want to pursue. Because again, getting in the door is important, but making sure you're happy while you're there is also just equally as important, because you don't want to be the person on your resume that was somewhere for 8 months and then you change jobs, and then you were there for another year, and then now you're on your second or third job, all within 2 year span. And so to me, it's like, well, is this person ever going to be comfortable in the environment that we have here? So those are things that I would make sure as you're listening. And again, just going back to my strength, that listening piece and showing empathy and influence is really what I found out was my skill set from GW. So sorry about that.
It's all good.
just to kind of piggyback, honestly, off all the other answers to this question. I mean, active listening is crucial into anything that you do. So when I was recruiting, you know, what I loved about recruiting was kind of listening to what, you know, these potential student athletes wanted. And as Tony mentioned, like kind of matching the best I can. So for example, Georgetown doesn't really have an engineering program. So if I spoke with students that were really, you know, interested in majoring in engineering, I'd be honest and say with him and say, hey, this might not be the place for you. And that's okay, right? So I kind of liked, you know, again, that listening, the empathy, and kind of carrying that over to, you know, what I do now. That's a lot of my job, honestly. As a campus recruiter, my job is to match people with the right opportunities in the right location, with what their with how, you know, they will align with their professional goals. So that active listening is kind of crucial. And I found that was a strength. Obviously, when I was coaching, listening to kind of how my athletes were doing, how my athletes were feeling at a certain point in the season or a certain point during a workout. So that's kind of how I was able to leverage those strengths into kind of what I do now. But yeah, active listening, I feel like, forget who said this, but you have 2 ears and you have one mouth, you know, for a reason. So that is really, really critical to any kind of career that you pursue.
Brian, I love that. It's one of my favorite sayings, and it's worth repeating. You've got 2 ears and a mouth for a reason. So I love, and truthfully, I don't think we talk about that as a skill enough. And so I appreciate y'all sharing that. I'm going to ask one question that came from one of our student athletes, and then I'm going to turn things over to Sarah to ask some of the other questions that came in. But one of the questions that came in from one of our gymnasts was, if you have any recommendations on professional development books, anything that you've read that's really resonated with you or has simplified things for you, or you just think is a good read as they finish up their summer before they come back to school.
So one classic one is What Color is Your Parachute? I think the first edition was like written in the 80s, but there's been plenty of editions later on. But that's actually a really good book, just kind of for anyone in any stage of their career. I found it very easy to read, and it gives you some good active exercises that you can do to kind of help direct you as well.
Great recommendation, Brian. I might have an original copy.
You're really dating yourself. I can't believe it's still published. I think one of the best things you can do is at least read the headlines in the Wall Street Journal every single day. Get it, make that a habit. Use this time to create that habit. And whether you dive into every article, you know, you don't have to. You're not going to read it cover to cover, but having. If you start now, you know, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, you've created a habit where you're really aware of what's happening in the economy and the market and the world, and I think it will pay off, you know, in large dividends to be able to understand and have that perspective. So.
Yeah, I think you're right, Debbie. You know, it's funny. I interviewed for a job a couple of years ago, and someone asked me if I read the Wall Street Journal, and I said, you know what, I don't. You know, I read the Times or whatever it may be, but understanding that business sense, what's going on with business. I mean, every business is affected by what's going on Wall Street. So I think that's one of a great tool. And again, it's just the headlines that you understanding. You know, who's making moves, who's closing down. Those are just things to talk about, not also at work, that open up other conversations, but also may put you in a light to have a further discussion with a client or someone else that, again, that's just going to open up a door or put you in favor, build a further relationship. So I think that's a great avenue. I think, as you talked about, Brian, the parachute book is great. I know there's another book that I read is about how to have difficult conversations. And I think, to me, that's one book that I think it was my mother had given to me, that right after my baseball career was kind of floundering, and I just kind of figured out, like, okay, well, gosh, you know, how do I have that conversation with myself? And, you know, and it's really, you know, you kind of use that to now have difficult conversations with family members, you know, coaches, you know, employers, you know, peers that you have. I think just some of the tidbits I picked up in there are important. And so to me, that's one book that I know that I specifically read and say I took away something from it. But Debbie, I definitely 100% agree with you. Even if it's just just going onto the app that they have and just reading the headlines. I think it's great important skills
Yeah,
to build upon.
and I think the thing with the Wall Street Journal, it's not just business. If you think, oh, I'm a business major or I'm going to work in finance or business, that's not. It's for all, whatever your major is, whatever you're doing, whether you're pre-med, you are design, to understand where these different trends are and sort of the sectors are headed. It's really important.
Awesome, guys. I'm going to jump in here with some questions that we got from the chat. We got 2 questions specifically about resumes. One question was, do you guys have any preference or have you seen trends based on length, 1 page versus 2 page? And then being Division I student athletes, where have you all seen that placed on a resume where it has been most impactful?
So I review a lot of resumes every day. So from a college perspective, from an experienced hire perspective, I may not be the best person to ask this, but a 1-page resume should be sufficient for you. There should be really no reason for you to be above that 1 page. So just keep that in mind, honestly. I mean, a resume is read 15 seconds, even actually less than that, maybe 7 to 15 seconds. So top to bottom. So have that, the most important information on the top and then from the bottom. And then I think Debbie was talking more about this, but when you're writing bullet points about, an internship or a project or what have you, like it should be action oriented, not a task oriented resume, right?
Correct.
So for example, I'm just kind of harkening back to my staffing days, but if it says like processes invoices for accounting department, like that is a task, but process 250 invoices to cut checks for blah, blah, blah. Okay, now you're telling me what you're doing and what the result was. So just make sure that's very clear on your resume.
Yeah, I would say that results-oriented piece, even for the executives that I work with. I mean, to me, everyone could say, led a department of 100 plus folks, but okay, well, again, what was the result of your leadership? So to me, it's like, I want to know what you did, from a morale standpoint, whether it be training, whether the development of folks. So, hey, if you're in the audience there, coming in senior year, you got that internship, maybe you cut grass all summer. It's okay. Was able to maximize my time by, cutting 2 lawns a day and cutting 3 lawns on the weekend. So it just shows that you're, again, putting more increase or more, delta in whatever activity you have. So outcomes, I think, as you mentioned, Brian, to me is the biggest thing that you could have on your resume. Even if it's not that one, if that 1 page, you can put that bullet point to just have an outcome that's there.
Those are really great, everyone. And another question that we got specifically for Brian, someone was curious what software you mentioned about developing Microsoft skills, I believe.
So I think what I was mentioning, just in terms of like learning how to use Excel. I mean, honestly, I'm a recruiter. I've had to learn how to use Excel. It is a really great reporting tool. So I think if you are able to kind of get familiar with that, get familiar with PowerPoint too. Those are 2 softwares or 2 programs that are really kind of just helpful to your development and just, again, I think an N type of role, like presenting material, presenting information in a very effective manner. Those 2 softwares or 2 programs are very important.
Brian, was the learning website Udemy?
Udemy, yeah, udemy.com.
Awesome, thank you. And then a final question that we have from the student side was, in what capacity were you all involved in clubs, jobs, or internships when you all were student athletes at GW?
All of the above. It was a little bit of a different time then, but I worked and did during the school year and then had some internship, had 1 internship, I think, as a rising senior, and was involved, not so many clubs. I was in a sorority, which was not really, didn't take that much time. I mean, athletics was the main thing. So that was my involvement.
Yeah, I know for myself, obviously, playing baseball in itself was enough. The curriculum that I had as an athletic training major, I felt like I played 2 sports because I actually had to play baseball and then also cover other sports. So that was actually my internship. I had to put over, I think, 1,200 hours or 1,500 hours throughout my GW career. So I really was, in the Smith Center 100% of the time, all the time. But I also then the summer times when I was playing baseball, I had little small jobs that I had as well. So I think I did data entry for one of the coaches that I played for at his work. So I was working with Excel at the time. But I also was a SAC representative for the baseball team. So I think that kind of came from high school. Being involved in something kept me involved and kept my time management focused. So I think that again, I don't know where everyone else is on the audience. If you're involved in SAC, I know you've got leadership, the committee that's there at GW now, and so there's so many things you can get involved with. So that'll keep you focused from a time management standpoint.
I was a member of the Student Athlete Advisory Council as well. And then I think it was called the Society of Professional Journalists. They had a organization they had a chapter. That's what I was. They had a chapter with that organization, so I joined that. But that was kind of the extent. I just wanted to kind of manage my time swimming every morning and every at night, and so that was kind of what I found to be best for me. And I think that's just something to think about too, is that you don't want to have 30 clubs on your resume, right? You want to have clubs that you're actually dedicated to and committed to. I've seen that a lot on resumes for colleges. I'm like, if you're like in 30 clubs, that means you're just probably a member and just show up to the meetings and just, that's kind of it, right? So just keep that in mind.
Totally amazing. We're like actually right on time, which means I'm going to disrupt it a little bit. I want the panelists, if they could, in 30 seconds or less, provide one last tip of advice to our participants today. So Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot. One tip or piece of advice.
Just be active, right? When let's say if you're looking for a job, just be active. You might not get, what you want that first week, 2 weeks, but just keep pushing at it. So whether it be going on LinkedIn or applying or reading up on a job or reading up on a skill set or learning something new, just be active, especially during this time.
Awesome. Debbie, you're next.
I would say two things. Don't be hung up so much on your first job on compensation. Really look at what the role is and what the company is. You're never going to have a better opportunity in your life. I know it feels like you need the money and you don't have any right now, but now is the time to really build that whole career path. So try to not be as focused on money early on in your career when you really should be looking at the role and the potential that it's going to sort of the path it will put you on.
Awesome. All right, Tony, bring us home.
Bring us home. You know what? Obviously, my thing for everyone moving forward is I'm not sure. Hope you guys watched a lot of the Michael Jordan special, but to me, be present, stay present. There's so many things that are uncertain right now, and it's easy to build anxiety about what the future holds and whatever. But be present. Spend the time with your family. Spend the time talking to your friends, because, like, as Debbie mentioned earlier in the call, is that you won't get this time back. So be present where you are. Understand it might not be where you want to be, but be present and give what you have for the day. Because again, I read a quote today, and I was trying to pull it up here, Tanya, as you asked that question, because I wanted to read it because I think it was pretty inspirational, even for me at this point in my career. And it would talk about each day begins with expectations and it ends with dreams. And so to me, in between those, it's staying present. And so to me, it's like, how do you wake up with expectations where I'm going to achieve so much today, but then there's so much that you have to stay present for in the day. But at the end of the day, you can dream ahead, but then you've got to get ready for that next day. So my biggest thing is, Michael Jordan never forgot shots right away because he stayed present. He forgot about what he missed or what he lacked in that one moment. So stay present. That's what I would say with the folks out there in the audience.
Super inspiring and really valuable information that you guys shared with us. I learned a ton. And I'll tell you, I've been moderating panels all COVID, and I really learned a ton from you today. So I appreciate it. I think my next job is to turn it over to Danielle and Sarah, who are going to talk about our final panel, which is coming up on August 12th.
Thanks, Tanya. Yeah, we have one final panel, which I'm going to let Danielle talk about in a second. And I wanted to let folks know that everything that we talked about here, if there are things that you want to go deeper one-on-one, feel free to reach out to myself or schedule a one-on-one appointment. There are things that we can talk about more and hook you up with other resources as well. So we're here to support you all. And then I'll turn it over to Danielle.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Our next panel will be on August 12th, and the title of it is called You Connected on LinkedIn, Now What? Building and Maintaining Professional Relationships. So we'll have a whole new set of panelists made up of our former student athletes. And I want to thank all the student athletes, all the coaches, all the staff, and especially our panelists and Tanya for hopping on today. It's just so many nuggets, like you said, Tanya, and I took a bunch of notes as well. So it's going to be awesome to look through those. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Tony, Debbie, Brian, thanks so much.
Thank you guys for the invite.
Raise
Best
high.
of luck to everyone.
Take care.
Guys, if the panelists want to stay on, if that's okay.
I hope you all could see the chat. You were getting a lot of thank yous.
Oh,
Nah, I didn't see that.
oh, that's nice. Oh, that's great.
You guys, that was amazing. I mean,